Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 3rd of April. And what an auspicious start. Post a little holiday. We had the break right here. And look at this. We started above what? The key, 23% level. And we just made it clear. Below 2616.50, this little magenta line, which is the 23%. You would want to be short, but we got a much earlier signal. Now, we talked about this before. No reset of the steel, and it didn't bring itself above the 13.5, which effectively would be coming from underneath. So you had no short-term buyers whatsoever within this setup. We've had a gentle rising of long-term buyers, but the mid-term buyers had already crossed us over, keeping us pretty much flat here, but didn't a whole lot left. And so when they started to fade along with the short-term buyers, yeah, you can see the effect, and that's going to keep us from crossing the negative 13. Let me just slide this over real quick so that you can see the end of the line a little bit clearer on the DOC. And there it is. It's not going to break above, meaning you just don't have a significant body of strength pushing it up. We're at minus 14, which is below, and you can see we've changed the line to the green color now. Short, well, I think they call it spring green. So it's just a little bit lighter, but at least when you're in this darker negative red area, it does stand out a little bit more so you can see for clarity purposes. So inherent weakness built into it. The shorts weren't all that overpowered in this, but until we started to see some activity right as your midterm buyers and that were starting to get weak. And so that's just, it exacerbates itself because once it gets going, the momentum of the roll just carries through, and there's not a whole lot to do. Fortunately, we get the early signals from the 5K chart we were putting on the Skype chat, and it was quick and easy. So you can see the NQ much better off, still closer to that 23%, which means it can even flip to more of a converted buy, and it finished well off the bottom, already coming up from that as we speak. And it's just the advantage they have when they can squeeze some people. You didn't have any euro collapse or breakdown through this, so strong central bank support within this is just keeping it even flat, which is still a benefit to the S&P. So some of the discount that's happening right now is going to be attractive to some buyers here very soon, another couple days, and we're going to be looking at a whole other set of inflows. Now, will the attraction though be to treasuries? It has been. You see in this weakness, that's exactly where money has been moving over the last week plus in a significant way, actually going all the way back to middle part of March. We started to see money coming back into it. It eased off a little bit, and then the new supply jumped right back in the later part of as like the 20th plus of March came in. There was just a significant amount of interest had shifted. And it makes sense because the Fed has said they're going to continue to raise rates, but you would think it would make it more attractive a little bit later, but that's not always how some traders think, and that's fine. We just like to look at it because it gives us an idea of what we can expect, and as long as you're seeing TLT rise, you can see there's going to be added pressure on the market because it's drawing funds away from it. And oil continuing to be a little soft on this breakdown of the shakeout. We had a little DOC spread here up at the peak, and it's filling back in, and the positive extremes had already been taken care of, so there's no real set move. I'm guessing we're going to do somewhere around that 50% range, and your typical ABC up, down, up kind of configuration. Gold definitely becoming more attractive as the indications that we may see more inflation are really becoming more and more apparent. Still strong growth despite all of the hiccups. This was a good one because we had severe meltdown in Bitcoin, and all that dropped as low as 6,700, I believe is what these numbers were down here. When it broke 6,790, and then started to catch some action as it was improving, and then a little bit of a breakout once it got over that 50% range early on. This is like just a 30-minute chart, so making a big push today. And that's just going to be a balancing act. Now this is our 5K chart, and what a mess this is. Look at how that is to be compressed to fit one day in here. And it started off with my tweet in the morning about this setup over here. Let me just slide this over, and we're going to go ahead and enlarge it now that you've seen the broader view. So we'll just increase our chart size so that we can get a better view of what I'm talking about here. So now we've zoomed in. So what I was pointing out is a couple of lines in the shakeout that we don't talk about often. Typically we'll get these little signals where you'll start to see an up move coming off of, a general decline that we saw, and it becomes attractive because you got to the 23%. But what I wanted to point out was this interesting detail about it, and why I was shorting as we were coming up into this level here, particularly as we were seeing the cyan break above green on the DOC. That wouldn't necessarily be enough when you're looking at a close like that. You're seeing the 6 and 7 buys that came early on, but the key aspect of it is understanding this relationship of the gold lines as well as the blue. These are mid and longer term trend indications, and they don't really start to make a move until you're significantly into a trend. So in this particular case, we can already see the gold line here rising into relative flatness at this particular point. When we see this take place, rarely do you get past the 50% fib line for a move. And so as we approach the 38%, we ended up with a secondary Azure. Now, if the blue breaks up as well, you've got an additional indicator. So I went ahead and took advantage of the 38%, expecting that the maximum I was going to see is maybe the 50% or a slight increase. So I had a 2-zone stop up here at the light blue line here. It's just like the cyan. And in this particular case, what happens is as soon as you start to see negative shakeout, in this particular case it was augmented by here the steel crossing below the cyan with this rise, sure enough the breakdown begins, and that led to, well, a situation where there was just no need to cover. And we were able to rack in, well over 100 points for the day on this breakdown. So this was up at 37 was the close. I was actually got lucky and had put a marker in just below the 38% at the 37.75, and turned out the next 2 bars, that's exactly what the high was, and got filled going in there. But you can see that no closes above the 23% on any of these, going all the way down. And so it takes us from 26.37 down to 25.75 as we started to continue to fade. But it became a couple of other critical ones. We had the same situation develop right here, where you're in falling shakeout, gold is rising, and you're making new lows. So it also helps in following a trend, because you know that you're going to be breaking down as it goes further. We ended up with a similar one that started right back over here, and sure enough we went from the 23%, didn't even make it to the 38, but it had to close above, which could be attractive under some circumstances. You didn't end up with a decent reset or anything from the DOC at this particular stage, but this lets you know that this wasn't going to travel very far. What we ended up seeing was continuation of that setup, and it goes flat here as we get towards break-even shakeout. So that one had a little bit more success, except for the fact that right at the 50%, it starts the up move again, and I said, hey, expect us to return back to the lows and head down from there because of this rising aspect. And sure enough, we touch the lows, and then it ends up making additional lows. And this is how we were able to cover at the low points and then make the turnaround, because there was potential for some decent long ones. We got to the above 23% on shakeout that was near positive. This just let us know that at that 50% line, it was about done. It's a little bit bigger even, because we're still even as expanded as it is. Telling you, it was a lot of bars in that day. So here it was again, that we were just showing that same one, And then we ended up with the several lows. Now, the exact opposite effect takes place when you're above the 50% line, and you would expect it to move towards the highs. So here we had another one where it started up here right at the 38% and just took us right back down to the low. At that point, we started to get rising shakeout. That one was a little bit less robust, but nonetheless provided the same direction. So here we go. And this was great because we had a member pointing it out. He's like, hey, we've got the rising gold. We're above the 50%. Does that mean we should expect the highs? Well, as soon as we ended up with the first shakeout tick and we're still above the 50% right here, we had a little bit of a dip just to test your strength. But both Azure as well as Blue rising into that, and sure enough, not only did it take the high, which was all the way back up to here. So if we just look at the numeric range on that, because it's a little tough when you're looking at it. So it was from the 50% was around 63, and then taking it all the way up to the high was 74. So good 11-point move. In this particular case, it went quite a bit. It went all the way up to the 80s, from the 60s. So 20 plus points on that move coming back. But it lets you know, and this is an interesting one because it's sort of an indication that there's strength within that trend buildup when you're in the particularly positive shakeout and when you're above the key threshold. So that's just a matter of giving you a better insight, because the expectation was for the higher, it wasn't for the short moving lower, despite what you were seeing going in here. Of course, the DOC, we ended up with the cyan dipping below. Red was right about this point, just above the 50%, which obviously would be a buy anyway, but needless to say, this was an early precursor to warning towards that bias direction. So I thought I would throw that one out. We ended up seeing a similar thing at the end of the day here as it was rising into a little bit of a soft shakeout from what would be a DOC spread, but it was an indication that it hadn't rolled over yet. And sure enough, it ends up making new highs on the day. And so here we takes us to the current live action, which is the pre-market. And we're still floating up at these peak levels, but we're starting to make lower and lower shakeouts on higher highs and weak DOC readings at this particular point, so we're a little bit off the highs at this particular spot. But the shakeout's still positive, so that's helping keeping things alive. But I thought I'd go over that one. I know it's taken a little bit of extra time, but it's a powerful little thing to look at. And now that all the functions have been sent out, we have the shakeout, as well as the DOC, the extreme histogram, the long-short algos have all been converted to functions, allowing members to, well, virtually create any kind of program you want. It's pretty fantastic, because what it does is it just allows you to receive the value for each of the different lines, and those can be put into conditions and a strategy for crossovers, one moves above the other from below, that kind of thing. And all sorts of flexibility, particularly depending on which type of chart you like or time frame. And so it certainly is going to make for a lot more flexibility. So hopefully everyone will enjoy that. I'm going to be working on the ABM, a little more complicated, but that's all right. It's all good stuff, because it'll even actually assist me in more rapidly changing programs, because I can just use the function call out instead of having to have the code for each of them in the programs. So all good stuff. As always, though, continue to look for me in the Skype chat. Trade well.